So the purpose of this, I wanted to invite Kate along to for someone to bring out what I do for people and organizations in a way that makes it really palatable for anyone who doesn't know what I've been up to in the last kind of 5 to 10 years. So that's why I've invited Kate along. And you, Kate, you've seen me in all the guises of my professional life in the last few years. So thank you for doing this for me.
Very welcome. Very pleased to be joining you.
Cool. So it's going to work like you'll ask me a bunch of questions and get curious and helping me get clear in my mind about what I'm up to. So wherever you want to start.
Perfect. I think what would be a good natural place to start with would be for you to attempt at least to summarize. If I said, look, in one or two sentences, what is it that you do? So if I've never met you before and I've got no idea and no background, and you've got a couple of sentences to summarize that, how would you go about doing that?
What I do for people is help bring out the best of them, the best for themselves. And an example of that would be I help people's minds become unburdened and present to what is, as opposed to attending to all the noise that can be in our heads. And when anybody does that, they do better at work and they feel better doing it too.
Okay, sounds brilliant and very positive. I wonder if just to kind of make it more kind of tangible and relatable to people, perhaps you could give an example of a hypothetical situation in which you might be able to help someone out.
Well, I could give an absolute one as opposed to a hypothetical one. Um, so for the first, I'd say 15 years of my work in developing people in organizations, it was very much around helping skills improve. And that was sales skills, presentation skills, negotiation skills, leadership skills, and lots of interpersonal skills too. And what I'd noticed is that while people were developing and they would have sometimes amazing results and often would have made amazing results, when I'd go back to ask them uh, what changed and what had been the results of the changes, they would say things that weren't directly in line with what I thought I was training them on. So, example, someone would say, I did a lot of negotiation skills training with one of your previous companies. And they would say, oh, my confidence is now much higher. I'm not phased by the procurement person that I'm negotiating with. And I go, well, I didn't talk about not being phased. I didn't talk about confidence. So it was curious for me. So then I went more directly into when someone is doing anything at their best, what's going on inside them. So to answer your question about a specific example, there's an individual contributor, sales, in a business to business organization who I've been working with quite a bit one to one. And his division in his business, when he shared this example with me not that long ago, well, they were meant to be growing, I think, something like 20 million that year in the division of 7 or 8 people, 7 or 8 individual contributors. And they would have specific products and services during quarter one, two, three, and four that they would go out to their client base to get more people to buy them. Well, the person who I'd been working with realized that he wanted to try something different and he thought he was going to listen far more intently to the client. And what he noticed was that his listening was so much better and deeper, and the client was opening up in ways he never had before. And in that conversation, what my client noticed was there was this completely untapped opportunity and need that the customer had, the client had, that he knew that his business could help. So the conversation took a turn in that unexpected direction. And because there wasn't any kind of contamination in that person's mind, the conversation went freeform into, okay, well, what would that mean? What would it need it to look like? And it was very much free thinking, present to the client and customer, as opposed to, well, this is not what I was told to do. Can we do this? What about my targets? All of that stuff, that noise that we often get preoccupied by, wasn't contaminating his mind at all. Now,
Mm.
as a result of that conversation with his client, they ended up, I think it was 180 million was the new piece of work that they got, which of course was a lot more than the entire division's target was for growth that year. And that was achieved. So a threefold target for the entire division by one person by the end of the first quarter of that year. So that's one example. And while that might seem like an extreme example regarding the results, those results are not abnormal, but I see that a lot with people because they're far more open to see opportunities, and all of their skills are deployed at a higher level than they would be if anyone was preoccupied with what's going on in their head.
I think one question I have based on that example you just gave is how would you respond to the question of to what extent your work is helping someone professionally versus helping them personally?
It's not lost in me who specifically asked me that question. Um, so thank you for asking that. I think they go hand in hand. And the reason that they must go hand in hand is because it goes deeper than the superficial behavioral level of somebody. It goes deeper to what does the world look like? And I mean the world look like inside an individual person's head and behind their eyes. So here's what I mean. If somebody changes the relationship with what they think and the extent to which they take their thinking seriously, that has implications across their entire life. So example would be overwhelm, stress, pressure, worry. If someone understands the mechanism by which they occur and really see the difference between causes and symptoms and causes and effects, when they see the difference, all of a sudden, they're far more free um, to express themselves in a way that isn't antagonistic. They're not attacking, they're not defensive, they're far more open, collaborative. That, of course, works with colleagues, suppliers, clients, and customers, but it also works with everybody else and everything else in their entire life. So the number of times when I go into to teams and organizations, and of course they're employing me, the company is, in order to get an increase in business results. The implications and the benefits are across the board for every single employee who hears something fresh for themselves.
Thank you. Really clear, makes sense. So I think you already touched on this question a little bit, but if I am a business leader and I am looking at my workforce, perhaps I'm an HR leader, and I'm considering bringing someone in to increase productivity or increase a kind of tangible metric, something that I could maybe measure in terms of output, because let's face it, the world we live in at the moment is one where demonstrating return on investment is very important for all things that we spend our money on, particularly as a business. How would you say, if at all, a business might see the tangible impact of the work you do with its people?
There are a few very significant metrics that can be noticed to be different after an intervention that I provide now. A few things that an HR person may be very interested in is that it decreases absenteeism, it decreases dissatisfaction in the workforce, so they're far more engaged in their work as opposed to complaining about it. They feel more empowered to do things in a really good way that changes things. And they're far more impacted, far less impacted by the things that are on their mind. So stress, worry, overwhelm, all of those things go down. And that doesn't mean don't change things. It means that anybody with a clearer mind is not susceptible to overwhelm, but also they have better ideas as to what can be changed for everyone's benefit. So that would be a few things for an HR person. The other thing is um, organizations have often they have these cultural measures for people. So in a few organizations, I know they call them high performance behaviors. The way of measuring the way people are at work. So that would include teamwork, collaboration, innovation, analytical thinking, problem solving, um, all of those drive for results, all of those kind of metrics that are often behind someone's end of year appraisal, as well as the business results. And I don't know anything that I've seen anywhere, and that's why I'm so passionate about what I do now, that answers every single high performance behavior that I've ever seen. And I've worked in lots of organizations. I even designed some for work for organizations I've worked in the past. All of the good things get better, as well as the results. Now, typically when I listen to people, leaders in organizations, including within human resources and head of people in various companies or head of sales, it often looks like there's one thing or the other that's on offer. So I either make people feel better or I help their skills improve. To me, the the programs that I co-create with corporates, what it does, it's like when I was a kid, they used to be called a skeleton key. Now they're called the master key in a hotel, right? Because it's a key card, and you just tap this key card on any door in the hotel, and it opens all of them. And that's one metaphor that came to my mind about what I know is available and on offer to companies when their employees really understand how the human mind works. And it might sound a little bit woolly and fluffy and woo woo. It really isn't. It's hugely practical. And it doesn't mean meditate. It doesn't mean take more coffee breaks or tea breaks or more time off. It doesn't mean anything like that. What it means is when people understand that the only thing they're ever up against that causes their mood to go down and their ability to connect to go down and their presence to a task in hand to go down is the degree to which they're focusing on their psychological well-being and their emotional well-being. When we are focused on this and we think we need to control it, fix it, change it, all of a sudden our attention is on things that aren't required in order for us to feel better and certainly are not required for us to do better. So what this does, it when anybody understands what in some organizations that I've worked with, we call it state of mind training. When someone understands that the state of mind that any and every human being is in is an internal, 100% internal, 100% of the time response, as opposed to outside in from other metrics or from what my boss says or what my supplier says or what's going on at home. When anybody understands that's an internal response, and the only thing that can bring us down is the degree to which we take our thinking seriously in that moment. When we see the truth of that, all of a sudden, our state of mind tends to be higher. And even when it's not so high, it's not such a big deal because we can just still carry on, even when it looks like, wait, this is a tough day. But we're so resilient to it. And based upon that, every person who sees this, their engagement to their work and enjoyment in their work is so much higher.
So, in what way would you describe what you offer and the way that you can help to be different to, for instance, other services, coaches, mental health first aiders, other things that employers might already have in place to enhance employee well-being, but also employee performance? Like, what makes you different?
I think that's a beautiful question that I often get asked. And my answer is that I want people to see that what's different is that there's a delineation between cause and effect. And here's what I mean. A lot of organizations, their well-being programs are let us do this program. I remember one organization, and I'm going to say this, I'm not saying it flippantly, they really thought this was a good behavior in all innocence, that they'd have an ice cream van on a Thursday, and they would have Mexican food on a Tuesday, and they would have Taco Tuesday, even though it was in central London. And while people loved those, it didn't change anything regarding people's well-being. It was effectively papering over the cracks. Or, in my words, it would be it's never going to be the answer because the cause doesn't come. Well being doesn't come from external factors in. Now, this does not mean, oh, permission for me as a boss to now be really mean to my people because that's just not it, because it doesn't matter. I'm not saying that. So, to any leader and anyone working in an organization, when they see the truth about that we're in a thought created reality, which takes care of itself without us needing to do anything about it. In that place, when someone sees that, then their internal resilience is higher because they realize how well they're made, how easy it is to get over things, and they have better ideas about what needs to be changed. So, as an example, I was having a conversation yesterday with someone about overwhelm, and there's been lots of studies on overwhelm in the workplace. And every single study that this person quoted me was talking about the effects of overwhelm, not the cause. So here's a weird example, right? Back in the Middle Ages, I remember this from history, right? A long time ago, not far from the Middle Ages either, when I was in school. That this is true what I'm going to say next, right? They thought that biological health came from four humors in the body, one of them being blood. And what they thought was if someone had a nosebleed, the cause was too much blood. So they would apply leeches and other things because, oh, if we tapped more blood out, then they wouldn't have a nosebleed. And that's confusing symptoms and causes. It may seem like a very bizarre example, but that's what the prevailing thinking in organizations regarding well being and performance is very much that way. It's looking at symptoms as opposed to causes. And in the last, I don't know, 15 years, I've been learning a lot about the truth of that for myself, which has helped me become far more present and achieve an awful lot more with an awful lot less mental effort and a lot less mental burden. When people go further with less on their mind, and they're not fixing symptoms because they understand the only cause that takes them away from their well-being.
That sounds very ideal and something I think we would all like to get to as a mindset. So what I mean, and this is more just an out of interest question, but what do you feel are the biggest challenges that workplaces are facing now with regards things that inhibit employee performance that you think your support could help to alleviate?
Speaking with somebody just before you and I started recording, my previous client is a very high achieving senior leader in her organization. And from her senior manager, who is, very senior and across multiple continents, the prevailing thinking in that organization is put more on people, more on their minds, more in order for them to achieve more. And And the same thing about this manager that I was talking with in what they do with their people. Okay, I'll give them more to do. I'll give them more. It'll help bring them up and bring the performance up. Well, nobody does better at anything when they've got more on their mind. Nobody. In any physical or mental attribute does having a busier mind help. Now, that doesn't mean let's all, let's all have brain surgery and take out our common sense and all our smarts. I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying is that the prevailing thinking of let's get people to think more to be able to achieve more is a total fallacy. And when anybody sees that and the beauty of what's available in someone's performance with an unburdened, clear mind, the results go through the roof. One of my mentors said to one of his first corporate clients, hey, I could show you a way of having double the results with half the effort and none of the stress. Double the results, half the effort, and none of the stress. Well, that potential client who did become a client for many years, for a couple of decades, didn't believe him. And that person is a dear friend of mine now. And but there was something certain in the way that this guy actually said it, and he went, "Well, that sounds way too good to be true." And if I didn't know better, I'd think it'd be too good to be true. And what I said earlier on about having a master key that unlocks all the high performance behaviors as well as the results, I'd think that would be too good to be true. Turns out it's not. It's absolutely available. And I've seen it far too many times from too many people and too many organizations in every part of the world to ever doubt it.
That's very compelling. It's a big claim, isn't it?
I
But
know. I'm glad I can back it up.
yeah, well, certainly very, I don't know, what's the word? It sounds very desirable, it's something I think we could all use more of. I'm certainly, if I'd only just heard of this for the first time, I'd be interested to learn more about you and what you offer. So I suppose it might be worth just covering some more kind of practical questions about what that support might look like. For those people who aren't familiar with you at all, can you give a bit of background as to, or whether or not there are any restrictions in terms of who and what kinds of companies you might be able to support, or any other sort of practical elements of the support that you provide, what format it might take, etc. Just in case anyone, kind of thinks there might be any restrictions around that.
I don't think there are any restrictions because if people have human beings, if an organization is run by human beings for human beings and it has employees that happen to be human beings, then this can be very helpful. Or, in my word, I would be transformational. Um, I think in my first 10 odd years of developing people in organizations, I was up to being very helpful with great ROI stories that would back it up. And I was astonished by the ROI. But if I was astonished then by the ROI, what this is huge, and there are no exceptions in my mind that I could see. How it starts is as simple as we have a conversation, and I'd get very curious if you're watching this, and I'd get curious about what you'd really love and wish for your people and the organization in whole, and I'd learn more about the challenges and what you've tried so far. And based upon that, we tend to co-create a program. I do not work off the shelf because I've never known that to work. And I always want to make it as relevant as possible to every organization that I work with because that matters. The relevance really matters. And I spend a lot of time in really investigating that to make sure that when I'm standing up in front of a group of people or sitting down with them, that I understand the direction of the business in a way that I will not seem like an external naive person. Now, I might be naive regarding the detail of it, but I would understand an awful lot more and speak your language as opposed to mine, because I think that matters.
Mm,
So it starts with a very informal conversation and to see where that goes, and then we co-create whatever makes most sense.
perfect. So, in terms of if a workforce is predominantly kind of offline, or sorry, online, or like versus being more in person, office based, that doesn't matter. You can kind of flex to all of that.
Yeah. And I mean, I had to change with that 5 years ago when everything happened, when all the lockdowns were happening and people were working from home back in
Mm,
the back in early 2020. I
mm,
was amazed as to how small the drop off was in the impact of the work I was doing, whether that was groups on Zoom or Teams or Google Meets, whatever that actually is. Now, preference is still in person, just because that provides it provides more of an opportunity for distractions to not take place.
hmm
But still, there's not a barrier. So, the number of times I will have a meeting, a training for 2 hours over, say, 2 hours these 2 weeks, then 2 hours in 2 weeks' time, and then 2 hours again 2 weeks after that. And we can do that in multiple time zones at the same time. So I remember doing that with Australia, Vancouver, Los Angeles, and Seoul in Korea, um, all in one time zone. Now, it did mean for me here in the UK that I was working 11 p.m. till 1 a.m. But I'd be doing that if I was flying to Seoul and Melbourne and Vancouver and Los Angeles anyway. So it was far easier. So there are no barriers technologically wise, I think, now, for whatever work that we do to be as impactful as possible.
So there is no preferred or required number of people in your sessions, or it's open, flexible. Okay.
And it's built upon the specific needs and challenges that any organization has. So it can be two people. If two people are leading an organization, for them to have a better way of working together and to have more of a focus on the future, then that works. The number of times I see a lot of people one to one, which goes a long way for them to understand what's really going on in their minds and to be far more free afterwards and far more
hmm
clear in a way that lasts, that their innate skills and their learned skills are constantly deployed at a high level.
hmm
And that can work with a team of 15 people or a company wide 60 group of people that I do retreats with as well.
Interesting something you said there around the potential to support perhaps a working relationship between two people. It almost conjures a vision of a like a counselor type role that you could play. I wonder, do you think that there is a way that is there a word, whether it be counselor or coach or mentor, that you feel you connect most to or best embodies what you do, or not so much?
Um, I don't really get hung up on labels. I mean, I use the word coach just because it's the word that I first learned about 26, 27 years ago that made most sense to me. Sometimes I'm called a training consultant, training advisor, trainer. I don't know, what was the other word I used a lot? Facilitator. Well-being facilitator is how I've been introduced recently for some companies. Performance facilitator is what I'm known as in somebody else's organization.
Mhm.
Um, those kind of things don't matter so much because I'd rather the impact speak for itself as opposed to me being known as anything.
Okay. And in terms of the sort of duration for which a company might want to sign up to using your services and having you as a resource, is there any restriction around that or preference around that? Can it be kind of a one-off situation, or do they sign a contract with you and work with you for a decided period? How does that work?
Again, that can be variable. There are times where I will work with an organization for maybe we'd have a 2.5 day event, then followed by a group of one-to-one sessions for each of the senior leaders. Or it could be drop-ins where there's a 2 hour window twice a month for anyone in the organization to drop in and ask questions, and we discuss things like that. So it's wonderfully flexible in the way that it works. And what I know is that when I come with that level of flexibility and nothing fixed, then the ideas that me and my clients actually come up with are far better than anything I could have predetermined before any conversation started. And it amazes me at some of the ways that the collaborations work these days I wouldn't have even thought were possible a decade ago. But here we are, doing things I didn't think would A, be possible, or B, would work. And well, that showed me.
That's great. I love that. So this all sounds great. Let's say I'm a CEO and I'm thinking, when I love the sound of everything you've said, super positive. Yes, perhaps there are some issues across my workforce that I think you could really help with. There must be some considerations or just questions or risks that I should be aware of or just consider before bringing you into a business. Um, or perhaps there aren't. How would you respond to that if I asked you, what should I really consider before bringing you in to work with my people?
To what degree does it matter for your business to grow in results and for your people to feel better doing it? I think that's the ultimate question that I come back to. Is it comes back down to that.
And I don't think many people would argue with that as an outcome that they would like. So that makes sense. So clearly, you're very passionate about this, and it's something that is part of who you are as a person, as opposed to just a career and an occupation for you. Just a bit of an, I guess a nice question. Like, what's your favorite thing about your job?
I love seeing years of burden be lifted from someone's face and their life. And when they come back and say that has totally changed my life and here are the results from doing it, that fills me with so much joy. Um, when I go into an organization after I've not been in there for a few weeks or months, and I can feel the energy, the collaboration, the mood being and the state of mind being so much higher than they could have dreamt possible. And it doesn't take more effort and certainly doesn't take more thinking. That to me is just beautiful to know that the culture in every single organization that exists on this planet right now can be dramatically improved, and there are no downsides. To see the potential of that to eliminate stress from the workplace, to have amazing levels of focus, but without the pressure that we think are entwined, because they're not. You can have a very focused, able, present person that has zero pressure and zero stress about them. And when I see that happening, it's awesome. So, an example, someone I spoke to today, another senior leader, having they spent a few days with me, 2.5 days with me earlier this month. Well, they're doing so much better at work already, and their partners noticing how much nicer they are at home as well. And they're going, I feel so much better in myself, and I'm doing better, and everyone says how much nicer I am. And to me, that's the win-win-win that feels like it's impossible and yet absolutely is.
That's really nice. Okay, I think before we kind of sign off or wrap this up, is there anything else you want to footnote to add? Anything you think is important to leave people with if they're thinking, yeah, okay, this sounds good. Maybe I'm still a bit on the fence. I just wonder if there are any sort of parting thoughts that you'd like to add before we close.
So for you watching, if you're curious about, is there a way that all the best in your workforce can be present for the vast majority of the time, and all the behaviors and characteristics of humans that aren't helpful for they to be null and void? It might sound too good to be true, but it isn't. This is the MasterCard to unlocking human beings' performance that's not only in the short term, but medium term and long term. People do better when they feel better and when they understand the mechanisms by which feeling better works. All of a sudden, that unlocks the potential of human beings in a workplace more than I ever thought possible. And I'm delighted to be doing it for a living now.
Thank you. It's really lovely.
Well, thank you, Kate. I've been really enjoyed your everlasting curiosity and your warmth in doing this too. So thank you.
Okay.
All right, I'll shut down the recording.